Second, here with us as well is Dr. Bella Shanzer. Dr. Shanzer is a psychiatrist with over 20 years of experience providing evidence-based holistic care to individuals struggling with mental illness. She has been a mental health and medical director at multiple hospitals, most recently as vice chair for clinical affairs at Baylor College of Medicine, the Menninger Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science. She's also a member of the Wellness Institute's Clinical Advisory Board, and in 2020 made Aliyah to Israel with her family and is joining us now from Ra'anana. Dr. Shanzer, I'm sure this week has been incredibly difficult for you and your children, so we thank you for taking the time to join us. Dr. Shanzer, please address one of our pressing questions. How do we keep ourselves and our kids sane and healthy during this crisis?
So first, Rabbi Tab, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing that video of the soldier. I have to reiterate, just from our own experience, thank God my son is learning in yeshiva. Has not drafted yet. So we're amongst the lucky ones who don't have any of our children serving yet. But it really is an effort on all parts. Everybody in Ra'anana we spent last week cooking and packaging and sending goods to the front lines. Over 300,000 reservists have been called up, and just nobody was prepared for the number of individuals who are needed for service. And to her point, really everybody is helping, and there's nothing too little. And so I'll get to that at the end, but I think it's really important to think about what she said, that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you can engage and you can feel like you're helping your fellow Jew and the land of Israel. So on that note, because we're specifically talking about managing anxiety and stress, before we do anything else, I want everybody to breathe. So sometimes when we're very worried, we catch our breath, like we find that we can't breathe. And sometimes we forget to breathe. So before I say anything else, I want everybody to take a deep, long breath with me. So you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And one more time. Even if you can't remember to do anything else, even if you can't find the strength to be centered, and trust me, I'm amazed at what you said about the parent from Beersheba, because we get very few, thank God we do not get a lot of sirens in Ra'anana. Although of course, because I said that something's going to happen in the middle of this talk, but hopefully I will make it through without a siren going off. It is very hard to remain centered and calm in the best of times, let alone when you're under stress. But if you give yourself a chance to breathe, you give yourself pause. Okay. Not only does breathing slow down it also gives you space. Right? And so why is slowing down your breathing so important in anxiety management? You have to remember that anxiety derives from a very good place. Okay? It's probably the emotion that's shared across all animals. Why? We use it as a source of protection, right? We become anxious because our body is telling us you're in danger, right? And it's the way for us to know that we have to do something to protect ourselves. And those things famously are fight or flight. And I always add freeze, because that's a lot of people also freeze when they're afraid. And because you might need to run or fight, right? Think about what happens when you're running or when you're fighting. Your heart starts to race because you need to get more oxygen to your muscles. You need to divert blood from your stomach to your arms and legs, to your extremities. So your heart rate goes up, and then you start breathing more quickly, because as since your heart isn't having enough time to open and close, meaning to really expand enough, you need more air coming in so that you get more oxygen into your blood. And the brain is monitoring all of this the whole time. Reflexively, when you slow down your breathing, which is the only sort of metabolic aspect of your body that you can control, it then, because of the way the brain interprets the increased lung capacity and the higher level of oxygen, the brain then says, oh, wait a second, maybe I'm not in danger. Oh, I can slow my heart rate down. And then you start feeling more relaxed. So taking a deep breath is always a good thing to do when you start feeling overwhelmed. It both gives you pause. To the rabbi's point, sometimes you just need to take a minute before you respond, before you react. Breathe. Remember to breathe. I can't say that enough. If you take one thing away from this whole talk, take away, remember to breathe. So in addition to giving you pause, it physiologically actually reduces your heart rate and you start to feel more relaxed. So that's item number one. The second, very easy, what I consider like low-hanging fruit to help really reduce stress in the moment, are muscle relaxation activities. Again, it is very hard to tell your brain to stop worrying. In fact, oftentimes when you tell yourself to calm down, you just get more worried. But you can control your physical body. And just like you can control your breathing, you can control your muscle contractions. And ironically, when you contract your muscles really hard and then let them go, it actually relaxes your muscles. And by doing that, and you can literally go muscle group by muscle group, you do one hand, then the other hand, you do your arm, your other arm, your leg, you can even do your tush, you can really, your toes, you can clench and release every muscle group. And if you do that right now, and I hope you all are trying this at home, I can't see you, but I hope you are, you will find that you are literally, you start to relax. And again, it doesn't change the situation out there. It doesn't make the terrorists go away. It doesn't bring us back the hostages. But what it does is in the moment, it gives you some control over your physical self. It allows you to take a pause. So you breathe, and then you just do some muscle relaxation techniques. And these take like a total of like 3-4 minutes. Right? But they literally help just take it down a notch. Now, all of a sudden, you're breathing again. Your body's feeling a little bit more relaxed. You've given your brain a chance to start processing information again. It no longer feels like it's in danger. When it's not in danger, it can think clearly. When you're in danger, all you're doing is reflexive responses. You're running, you're fighting, you're freezing. But when you start to feel more relaxed, all of a sudden you give your brain space to actually start thinking about things in a more logical, less reactive way. So that's item number one. And that's, I think, again, most important thing. So you'll hear me refer back to it because I think it is so important. Okay. Item number two, in order to be a good parent, you need to be good to yourself. And I'm going to refer to the airplane industry as being one of the most psychologically minded industries in terms of their approach to oxygen. So I don't know who on this webinar has been on a plane recently, but I'm sure you are all familiar with the stewardess or steward standing up at the front of the plane and they say, you know, mom or dad puts the oxygen on their face first, and then they put the oxygen on the child. I want you to always remember that. You know why mom or dad has to put the oxygen on first? Because if you're not breathing, you can't help your child. If you don't have oxygen, you are no longer capable of helping your child. You can only help your child if you yourself are functioning and breathing. And that's why you put the oxygen on first, right? It seems counterintuitive. As a parent, certainly as a mom, our first reaction is to help our child, right? We always put ourselves in the back burner. We don't worry about ourselves. We worry about our children almost to a fault. And I think this is a universal Jewish mother, and I'm sure most Jewish fathers, and I think it's probably a universal parent. We want to protect our children. We want to take care of them. And so we assume that it's more important for us to take care of our children than to take care of ourselves. But what you forget is the oxygen model. If you are not taking care of yourself, you cannot take care of your children, because then you are not a good parent. Right? And again, I want to, and so I came up with this little thing for myself that I like to think about, because it feels selfish, right? Why should I take care of myself if my child? Well, self-care is not being selfish, it's being self-aware. And I think that's really important. When you start having those thoughts in your head, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's selfish for me to make sure that I'm getting a good night's sleep. No, that's not being selfish. That's being self-aware. Self-care is being self-aware. And I think that's really, really important. We live in an age where we get so caught up in making sure that our children have this and our children have that, and that we forget that we are a person also, and that as a person, we need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our children. So how do we take care of ourselves? Back to the basics. Okay, nothing that I'm going to say right now is heavy duty science. These are just basics that we ignore. Okay, and I think it's interesting that we run after the shiny new toy and we forget about the good old things like sleep, eating, exercise, sunlight. Okay, sleep. I cannot stress how important getting a good night's sleep is. Sleep is the most underappreciated superpower in today's day and age. I mean, I'd be curious to take a survey. How many people on this webinar actually get at least 8 hours of restful sleep? That means not checking their phone in the middle of the night. That means not having some, computer right before they go to sleep. How many people actually respect their sleep? How many people make sure that they have a good sleep routine, that they are turning their devices off at least an hour before bedtime so that their brains can relax, that they are making sure that their bed is just for sleeping? I mean, how many people here actually respect sleep? Probably very few. I'm just going to take a guess based on my own. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist now in private practice in Israel, and I will tell you that my experience with patients that most people don't appreciate sleep until they can't sleep, and then they are so worried about sleep. If you don't have problems sleeping, appreciate that and take advantage and sleep. And if you are struggling with sleep, then talk to your doctor. I can't stress, I really, really want to underline this. Making sure you're sleeping well. Just think, if you don't have a good night's sleep, even in the best of circumstances, you wake up the next morning, you're a little off, you're a little more grouchy, you're a little bit more irritable. I mean, trust me, when your child doesn't have a good night's sleep, right? That's the thing. My son didn't sleep well last night, and that's why they're behaving this way. And do you think you're any different than your child? You're the same human being, the same atoms, same brain, just a little bigger. And so if you're not getting good sleep, you cannot be a good parent. And thankfully, there are a lot of interventions for sleep. There are cognitive behavioral therapies for sleep. There are medications, but the first thing is to make sure you have what we call good sleep hygiene. Okay, and some of the things I mentioned are just important. Make sure you're not drinking caffeine after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Make sure you're not eating big meals after 8. Again, all this stuff is really readily available online, but I want to stress that it's important to really do it. And in particular, you gotta put the phone away. I mean, the number of people who complain to me about sleep problems, and I find out that they're literally scrolling on their phones while they're lying in bed. Well, how are you going to fall asleep when all that visual stimulus is going to your brain? You're not even giving your brain a chance. So please put the phone away. In the ideal world, by the way, your phones would be in the kitchen and you'd get good old alarm clocks to wake you up in the morning instead of your phone. Because that's what everybody says to me. Oh, but I need it for my alarm. Well, we used to actually be able to wake up with alarm clocks before iPhones. I know that's like a crazy idea, but get an alarm clock and plug the phone in the kitchen. And then you don't have your phone, and trust me, it will help your sleep. Second, back to basics, good nutrition. Something that we always skip out on when we're worried or when we're stressed or when we're busy is good eating habits. Literally 3 meals a day. Right? And make sure that they're healthy, and then you're just snacking. Nowadays, everybody just grabs these bars. I'm not saying that the bars don't have nutritional value. They probably do. They have protein, whatever, but it's not the same thing as sitting down and eating a meal. And you know what's really nice about sitting down and eating a meal? You can do it with your family. If there's any way for you to have 1 meal a day as a family, that is actually, they've done studies on this. It is a great way to actually enhance communication with your children and reduce risk-taking behaviors. You know why? Because you're talking to them. You're sitting around a table, you're sharing a healthy meal. And look, I'm a working mom. I know how hard it is to get everybody at the table together. I'm not like, Leave It to Beaver, Susan Cleve. Like, that's not my life. Trust me. There are nights that I get home at 8 o'clock at night and my children are annoyed with me that it's so late, but I make them sit at the table, even if we're not eating dinner anymore. We sit down for at least 10, 15 minutes just so that we can see each other, right? And so when you combine nutrition with literally sitting with your kids at the table, it's an incredibly helpful experience for everybody. And it's truly self-care for the whole family. Number 3, exercise. I realize I'm not saying doctor things, but these are really important. And the fact is they've been scientifically proven to help. So you might as well take advantage of things that don't cost money. You don't need a pill. You don't need to see the doctor for it. Go take a walk. Exercise has been shown to reduce anxiety. In fact, for moms and dads who are worried about how their kids do in school, exercise has actually been shown to help children do better on exams. They did a study comparing a group of kids who exercised and a group of kids who didn't exercise before taking the same exam. And with everything else held equal, IQ, all that stuff, the children who exercised did better on the exam, and especially complex exercise like yoga, Pilates, things that make you think about things. But even running, even just taking a walk, exercise releases your body's own basically happy hormones, right? Adrenaline, noradrenaline. These are hormones that help make you feel better. right? And also, the more you exercise, the more control you have over your heart rate, because you've learned to slow your heart. When you exercise and you're in good sort of cardiovascular shape, your heart rate is lower at baseline. And so you just feel better. And then it is easy. And in fact, a lot of people say they run, it helps them clear their mind. That's true. Running is fantastic, but really just walking. And if you can exercise and combine that with sunlight, so if you can exercise outside, I realize that's not always possible during various times of the year, but when you can get outside, get outside. So many people these days suffer from vitamin D deficiency, which actually is associated with worsening moods. Okay, so we know that there's diurnal changes and there's also seasonal changes in mood state, right? So there are the winter doldrums, spring fever, right? When you have more sun, you're happier. When you have less sun, you're less happy. These are, we know this. And take advantage of sun. Put on the sunblock, be careful, but get outside. Take a walk outside. You get fresh air, you get sunlight, and you get exercise. And you're making yourself feel better. All in incredibly natural, healthy, fantastic ways that also are good for your heart. It's like a win-win. And if you can do that all with another person, well, then you have my final self-care tip, social connections. One of the hardest parts about COVID for most people was the breakdown in social contact, the sense of isolation. Like that's for most people, it was less about the fear of dying, although obviously that was very pervasive, but for the majority of individuals, the hardest part about COVID was the isolation, was being alone, was not being able to connect with another person. And I would say that loneliness is a factor oftentimes in our mood states. And when we're alone, it's hard. It is critical in times like this, especially in times of crisis, to make sure to maintain social connections. Don't go through this alone. Be with another person. Go for a walk with another person, call them on the phone, go get together with them in person. I mean, thankfully in America, you do not need to worry about going into your bomb shelters. There are no limitations to group gatherings. Gather, talk to each other, be with each other. That's an incredibly enhancing experience for most people, and it helps reduce anxiety. And I'm gonna touch on Judaism for a little bit. I hope that's okay, Rabbi. There's an idea in Judaism that when you visit somebody who's sick, you take away a 60th of their illness. I've always thought a lot about this as a scientist. I'm like, what does that mean? So how are you taking away? And what I've really come to believe, and I really believe this, is that you're taking away a 60th of their stress of being ill. Of course, you can't cure somebody from their illness by visiting them, but you can make them feel a little better. You can make them a little less alone. You can take a little bit of the weight of the stress that they're going through by really being with them. I mean, just think about when you tell a friend how you're feeling, you instantaneously feel just a little bit better because that burden is now being shared by two people instead of one person. I mean, the same is true for the Jewish response after death, right? We pay Shiva calls. In fact, this is something that I think is true across all the denominations of Judaism. People sit Shiva, and then you go, why? Why do we need to go why do we need to sit with somebody who's just lost a member of their family? For the same reason, because you're helping to take away a little bit of the pain that they're carrying. You're making their burden just that much easier to carry. Social connections allow us to ease our burden. And when we're in times of crisis, when our burdens feels overwhelming, like we can't even wake up in the morning, having somebody to share that with is one of the most helpful things. So please, social connections. So I just want to review quickly. I want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end, so I don't want to talk the whole time, but number one, remember to breathe. Number two, remember that self-care is not being selfish. It's being self-aware. You're acknowledging what you need for yourself in order to be the best parent, friend, husband, wife, worker, whatever it is that you are, and that there are a lot of things in the fill in the blank over there. You have to being self-aware of what you need is critical to ensuring that you can function. And from my perspective, the most basics are sleep, nutrition, exercise, sunlight, and social connections. Okay, now that we've made sure that we can function, that we've cared for ourselves. Now we need to turn and pivot. How do we care for our children? Well, number one, all the things that are important for you are important for your kids. Right? I'm the mother of teenagers. If I tell you the number of times, I don't even know what time to go to sleep anymore because I'm too tired to stay awake. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily good or bad, but I will tell you that I do make sure that they go to sleep at a reasonable hour because when they have school, because they need sleep, especially adolescents. Okay, teenagers think they don't, and teenagers are on their phones till all hours of the day or night. Trust me, you don't even probably realize how late your kids are on their phones. Not good, not healthy for them. Right. And I know it's hard to fight with them. They want to speak to their friends after school. And my children always tell me, oh, we need to speak to our friends in the United States. This is the only time for us to speak to them. We stay up really, really late, during their like lunch break at school. I'm never really sure if that's true or not, or they're just like watching YouTube. But suffice it to say, it's important to make sure your teenagers sleep, your young kids sleep. And in fact, sleep is a very sensitive indicator for anxiety. So I would say that in terms of if you're thinking that your child may be more worried than would be expected, see how they're sleeping. Sleep disturbances are good. They're like, from my perspective, one of the canaries in the coal mine for seeing if your child is starting to become inappropriately anxious or maladaptively anxious. Okay, because I want to just remind you, like, being anxious is not a bad or good thing. It just is. The question is, how is it impacting us? Okay, so after making sure your children sleep and make sure that they're getting good nutrition and that they're exercising, again, I want to highlight family dinner, even if you can do it once a week. The more nights, the better. But try to incorporate some level of family dinner. And this is where, even if you're not a Sabbath observer, Friday night dinner, 2 thumbs up to Friday night dinner. Okay, you get your kids to sit around the table. They don't have school the next day. There's no pressure. They're not rushed to go anywhere. Get them to sit with you for half an hour on Friday night. It will pay off in dividends in terms of family connection. And why is it so important? Because you need to talk to your children. That is the most important way to help them. We've gotten to the point where we sometimes are afraid to actually ask our children questions. We don't want to know. We're afraid of what they're going to tell us. It's not PC. I'm not supposed to ask my kids these things. We come up with all these really rather like interesting justifications in our mind for why we don't actually talk to our children. That is the most important way for you to help them, because you don't actually know what's going on inside their heads unless you ask them. And by the way, do not assume that you know what your child is thinking, what your child knows, what your child has heard. We have a tendency to project our own fears, worries, thoughts onto our children. We're like, oh, well, if I feel this way, my child must feel this way. That's not usually the case, actually. I'm always amazed at how strong and sensitive and understanding young people are. You just need to ask them. And so sitting with them across the table, sharing a meal and saying, how are you feeling? What do you know? What have you heard? You can't help your child unless you know what is going on inside of your child. And the only way to know truly what's going on inside of your child is to ask them. Obviously, there's a range, right? Younger children, you need to do it in a different way. If your child is not so articulate, or is not verbal, or is under a certain age, or lacks the vocabulary to really describe their emotional state, and obviously young children don't necessarily know how to describe their emotional state, sit down and draw with them. Give them some clay, give them toys, and literally interact with them and see how they're feeling. Because before assuming that X, Y, and Z is happening, you really need to know, and you need to ask. So I want to stress that. Asking your children, talking to them, it's really, really important. That's also how you develop a relationship with your child, even in good times, right? And I would say that the time to start talking to your child is in the good times. Don't wait for the crises, because by then, they may not want to share anymore. And this is important. Look, right now we're talking about this because there's a global crisis going on, but your child has crises all the time. You may not think they're crises, but they may be experiencing them as crises. They had a fight with their friend. That might be experienced as a crisis for them. They have an exam coming up that they haven't studied for. That might be a crisis for them. But you don't know what they're feeling unless you ask them. So please, please, please talk to your children. Number 2, and I know this is like I'm preaching to the choir, and it's almost impossible, but to the degree that you can, limit social media. I mean, no person, let alone a young person, should see the images that are being put out there. I mean, I personally am not on social media because I just feel like I can't, it's too much. But I'm very aware of what's going on. And nobody should see those images. Okay? And if your child has already engorged themselves on those images, talk to them about what they've seen. They're really going to need to process, not with a professional, but their parents. It may be hard for you as the parent to hear what your child has seen and to hear what your child is thinking. And then that's where you turn to your social connection, either your significant other, a friend, if you need to speak to some professional, but your sort of our responsibility as parents is to let our child tell us what's going on inside them so we can take it away from them and so they don't have to hold it anymore. Because the idea is, we hope, is that as mature adults, we're more capable of processing the distress than our child is. I realize it's hard to limit social media exposure. First of all, they have friends. Half the time you don't even know, but to the degree that you can talk to them about it, ask them what they're seeing, sit with them. Say, you know what? I realize that you're very curious in seeing what's going on. Let's sit together and view it together so that I can at least help you process what's going on. Again, what the theme, be a resource for your child. That is how you help your child get through this, is by being there with them. Just like you need a friend to talk to, be your child's parent, sit with them, listen to them, help them understand what's going on. And by the way, don't be afraid to talk to them about it. Trust me, they know already. To pretend that they're unaware is not helpful for them, for sure. And it's probably not really a good strategy in terms of maintaining a good relationship with them long term. They need to talk about it with you. Don't be afraid to talk about it with them. If your children are younger, use language that's appropriate for younger children. Obviously, depending on the age of the child and the maturity level of the child, the conversation should change and the level of discussion and detail should change based on the age and maturity of the child. But whoever your child is, trust me, they know something's going on. They're hearing about it in school, they're hearing it from their friends, they're seeing it on the news. Talk to them. In terms of when you should be concerned, you monitor for behavioral changes. So like I mentioned, sleep, very, very sensitive, but also are they, do they not want to go to friends' houses? Are they struggling with school? Are their grades slipping? Are they having trouble doing their schoolwork? Again, these are all soft signs that should raise a flag. Something's going on with my child. I need to find out what it is. It doesn't mean that they need to be on medication and they need to see a psychiatrist. It just means that you as a parent need to reach out to your child and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help you through this? What can I do to help you manage what's going on? And finally, and then after this, we'll do questions, is to circle back to the soldier, engage in meaningful activities. Some in the ends of the day, anxiety oftentimes derives because we can't control what's going on and it makes us afraid. And in this case, quite frankly, really none of us can control what's going on. We are all sitting, we are waiting, we are hoping for the best, we are davening, but we can't control it. But what we can control are our own activities. And doing meaningful activities, especially with your child, really helps them feel like they have some agency. They have some control over what's going on. And that in and of itself can help reduce their sense of anxiety. And it also will help your sense of anxiety simultaneously. And it'll be a nice way for you and your child to bond. Before this started, one of the women was telling me that people are doing lemonade stands. Fantastic, write letters, draw pictures. By the way, the Chayalim really love the letters. It gives them strength. They really feel supported when they know that all of world Jewry is behind them. What they're going to be doing this week is incredibly difficult. And having your support, your children's support in letters and donations and videos is incredibly important. And it'll help your child feel like they have some agency. It'll help you feel like you have some agency. It'll help your relationship. And it's like a win-win for everybody. So remember oxygen, remember to breathe. And now I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schanzer, for giving us those very practical tips to keep ourselves and our kids sane and healthy during this crisis. And thank you, Rabbi Shais Taub, for addressing the spiritual element and finding and keeping the faith and strength during these challenging times. If anyone does have questions, now is a good time to submit them in the chat. And someone's asking, what age is too young to talk about what is going on?
So I would say that in that case, it really depends on your child. Okay, so there's some very precocious 5-year-olds, and then there's some 10-year-olds who, kind of don't really know what's going on. I mean, it's there. I don't think that there's any cut off. The first thing to do is you ask your child, how are you doing? Just start with a very low key question. How you doing? What have you been hearing in school? Are you aware, has anything been going on that you're concerned about or that you're worried about? Ask them, give them sort of opening questions, sort of open-ended. We call those open-ended questions, and see where their thoughts are. Right? They may know something, they may not. They may just feel that something's weird, but they don't really know what it is. You can use language that's appropriate for the age of the child. You don't need to give them the gory details. If your child says, yeah, I heard that there's something going on, I don't really know what it is, but I'm a little scared, you can say, there's something going on in the state of Israel, but our strong soldiers are fighting and we're going to be supporting them. And I'm here if you need me. I'm here to give you hugs, and I'm here to support you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this question is geared for, but whichever one of you feel ready to take on this one. With the rising anti-Semitism, how do we teach caution without scaring our children and making them afraid to go to Jewish schools?
I'm happy to jump in, although, Rabbi, I think this is probably your alley, but I would just say that, you can be honest with your child, but there's, unfortunately, we live in a world where there are people who hate other people for no reason. And we see this in the United States. There are many isms that we have to struggle with, and in Israel, and this is not a unique phenomenon in the United States. But we should still be able to feel safe in our school. And I think reinforcing to your child that yes, there are things that are very scary out here, but we can still feel safe in here. And you do that by, again, connecting with your child. At least in my clinical experience, feeling loved by your parent is literally one of the most powerful tools for resiliency. You feel that core of support and love from your parent, you can really survive almost anything. And making sure that your child feels that you support them in spite of all the craziness that's going on outside, anti-Semitism, this thing that they will manage, and they will probably exceed your expectations of success.
Thank you, God willing. And thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you feel you or your child need urgent help, please reach out to a therapist or a mental health provider for help in finding one. A great resource is the Relief Network. They can be found at reliefhelp.org. I would like to say that next week, I believe, the Wellness Institute will be hosting a virtual support group for family members, spouses, and parents of lone soldiers who are currently fighting in Israel. This will take place next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and feature Dr. Andrew Shate, a resilience expert, as well as thoughts from others whose family members are deployed. And you can sign up at wellnessinstitute.org/lone soldier. A recording of this event will be sent to all those who have signed up later today. Please feel free to share it with any family or friends you think may benefit from what was discussed here. Once again, we pray for peace, comfort, and safety for all Jews in Israel and around the world. We wish you a great rest of your day, and we apologize if some of your questions weren't addressed today. Thank you so very much for joining us.